Welcome back. You're still tuned in to News and Views with myself, Salaila Makudiere. The time is 13 minutes past 9 Central African time. And we're going to be switching gears now to a very, very important topic. Since the United States and Israel launched their campaign, should we call it that, against Iran, the conflict has spilled north. Israeli airstrikes have hit multiple towns across southern Lebanon. Hezbollah has responded with rockets, and entire communities have been displaced. More than 1 million people, by some estimates. At the very same time, the U.S. has been trying to, quote unquote, contain the front, pushing for indirect talks between Beirut and Tel Aviv, aimed at calming the situation, especially in the southern border, and preventing a second full-scale war from opening up. But that track is now under serious strain. Hezbollah has come out strongly against some of those talks, saying Lebanon should walk away entirely, and arguing that they can't negotiate while Israel continues to strike inside the country. And all of this is unfolding as the U.S. is also tightening its grip on Iran. We heard of a naval blockade that is now in effect, that is now in place around the Strait of Hormuz, and it's raising serious fears on whether this war is entering a far more dangerous phase, and Lebanon itself could be the next full front between, Israel and the United States of America. And we are now joined by Lebanon-based Lebanon-based researcher and editor, Michelle Eid, who's joining us via our virtual platform to give us a bit more insight on this and how Lebanon should be responding to this tug of war between the government and Hezbollah, and the direction that they should be taking going forward. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to News and Views. Really appreciate you giving us your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me this morning.
And I think we'll jump right into it. From your vantage point, how would you analyze where we currently find ourselves? There are talks of whether or not the Lebanese government should be talking to Israel, should be negotiating. And on one hand, Hezbollah says you can't be talking or negotiating with people that are bombing you day in and day out. We saw last week the images that were coming out of Lebanon, and it's becoming very, very clear that it is a dangerous place. We see displacements. We see Beirut, which is now under attack. These attacks were usually in the southern border with Israel, but they are now inside the country. Just your analysis of the state of affairs?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit to the situation that Lebanon is currently experiencing. So in very plain terms, the war never ended. Though there was a ceasefire that took place on November 28th, 2024, after the 66-day war Israel's war on Lebanon. The bombing has been almost daily, but it has mostly been touching areas in the south or areas in the Blockade, to the east of the country. And so once things escalated again earlier last month, I can't believe it's been this long, almost a month and a half of this taking place. It has done so at a very, very accelerated, in a very accelerated manner and a very intense manner. So there have been several campaigns that are reaching several areas in Lebanon. So it's not only southern Lebanon, it's the Bekaa Valley, it's the area around Baalbek, which are both east of the country. It's Beirut's southern suburbs, Dahiya, and also even other areas that are outside of these quote-unquote zones that they like to define as the war zones here in Lebanon. And as you said, the humanitarian situation is quite tough. So we have over 2,000 martyrs so far in the past month and a half alone. You have around 6,700 people who have been injured. And I prefer not to use the word injured, really. It's more maimed, because the extent to which people are being affected, not only physically, but mentally, these are scars that you carry for years and years to come, and they just don't fade away as soon as the wound fades away off the body. And you have over 1.3 million people who have been displaced from the south, from Beirut's southern suburbs, and from the Bekaa. And so now the talks are, there have been several things going on. So as you may know, in the conversations that have been have been happening between Iran and the US over their own ceasefires or truces, Lebanon has been a point of contention. So as we saw with the state of attacks that happened in Lebanon on Wednesday, where there were over 100 strikes across the country in a matter of 10 minutes. And in Beirut alone, there was somewhat of a fire belt where you had about 12 to 13 strikes across Beirut and its suburbs. And there was a big cry about this because Lebanon was supposedly part of the ceasefire agreement as Iran put it on the table, but then the US and Israel went against that matter and said, no, this wasn't the case, even though we saw what the Pakistani Prime Minister expressed on his Twitter account as well, and Pakistan being the moderators of these negotiations. And so you have that on one end where Lebanon is being negotiated for really without being present. And now there's the possibility of it negotiating with the aggressor themselves. And so, you know, we can really debate this on and on. And it's really important for me to express this now and say that my role here is really questioning things and asking about what things are right and wrong. It's really hard to have a solid response. It's really hard to say, you know, what someone should do and should not do. And I can have my own opinions as a citizen of Lebanon, as a Lebanese person. But once we've seen what Israel has done in the past 3 years and even much longer in the region, it's really tough to imagine how our country, Lebanon, can really sit down with the aggressor and come out of it with concessions that don't include giving up parts of the land or don't include, undignified means, really. So now there is a limbo where Lebanese people are really stuck. I mean, I find myself and my surroundings find myself really confused about what could even come out of these talks. Because you know, how can talking work if we've seen such aggression take place and such atrocities take place, really?
And I think that's very, very important to note because it feels like a rock and a hard place for the Lebanese people. Do you say we're not going to be part of these talks and these negotiations and continue to be bombarded daily and continue to be killed and, as you mentioned, maimed by these attacks by Israel? Or you negotiate with the aggressor? You know, the famous phrase out of the US is we don't negotiate with terrorists, but this time around it looks like that is the case. Let's talk about the Hezbollah element here. They are the ones that are unequivocal about whether or not the Lebanese government should be entering these talks. What do you make of the role that they are playing and some of the comments that they've been making regarding this?
I would say, though, to this point, I don't think it's only, even though Hezbollah might seem as the main entity that is opposed to these talks, there are so many people in the country who do not necessarily affiliate themselves with the party, who are also against these talks because of a very, very wide history, you know, prior to even Hezbollah even existing. We've seen a lot of atrocities committed by Israel in various different towns, and particularly in the south, in Shiite towns, but also in Christian towns, and Sunni towns, and in Durzi towns. So this has always been a struggle, and, you know, obviously everyone has differing opinions. Now, what their perspective is in this situation at large, I can only speak so much to it because the main focus now has been on their military approach and the things that they've been doing on the ground and the way that they have been able to keep out aggressors in several different towns via not hand-to-hand combat, but in theory hand-to-hand combat. But I think what Hezbollah is showing at the moment, even though, of course, they don't agree with the negotiations like many other people do, is they're showing a lot of restraint and a fear, politically at least, for what's to come. Because we've seen to give a little background on this, Lebanon's multi-sectarian or multi-confessionalism has always been a point that has been abused by many people or many entities from abroad, whether it's by the Ottomans, by the French, by the British, and now by the Americans, by everyone, by even Iran, even everyone else. It's always been a source of contention because they know that the country can be divided based on confessional belief. And so, what the fear is, and I go back and tie to my point because I know I went on a bit of a tangent, is there's a fear across the board in Lebanon that the civil strife is accelerated because even noticing the pattern of attacks that Israel has been conducting in areas that have not been warned, and I have a lot to say about these warnings and the inhumanity of these warnings, but let's go with this logic a little now. Um, them attacking areas that are Sunni or that are Christian or predominantly, let's say, this is all part of adding fuel or adding fuel to the fire of civilian strife that is very easy to poke here in Lebanon. And so what Hezbollah now is what I've noticed is doing is it's exercising some restraint in the way that they put things out and the statements they put out about the government itself and about people who differ in their opinion in the government and in the country really, because there were because of these fears. And so while we know that they are against these negotiations, it also is being presented and communicated in a way where Lebanon first, we want to put Lebanon first. So, for example, there have been protests taking place. There were a couple of protests that took place last week. And these were related to the situation that displaced persons were experiencing. So there has been a lot of neglect from the government and how to approach the situation. And maybe we can't say it's really purposeful neglect. It's a matter of unresourcefulness as well, because they have been functioning at a certain capacity. But the reality is that Lebanon only has so many resources and capacities. And so there were these protests, and that were attended by a lot of people, and primarily people who belong to the Hezbollah ideologically. And Hezbollah and another Shia-led political party put out a statement asking that people not go to the streets, even though you're facing so much at the moment, but in respect for civil strife, because there is this fear. So I would say on the internal level, there's a lot of restraint in the way that they're putting out their opinions, because everyone at this point is worried that something may, light the fire and people start internally fighting, while there's an aggressor fighting us with very massive and developed weaponry and trying to take parts of our land. So this is something that's quite tough to be stuck in between.
Very, very important. I want to bring it back to the Iran factor here. They have made it quite unequivocal that Lebanon is very, very key when it comes to the negotiations that they are having with Israel and Iran, which unfortunately have collapsed. And you have someone like J.D. Vance saying Iran would be dumb to let talks collapse over Lebanon. When you look at this conversation, you mentioned it, I think, quite clearly, the fact that there are conversations happening about Lebanon without Lebanon being around the table. When you listen to these conversations and these sentiments, what do you make of this reality, and how some are trying to attach the Lebanese front, if I can call it that, to the US Israeli war on Iran, and some are trying to separate it from that? How do you analyze both realities with Iran in mind, most importantly?
It's a very tough situation to be in as someone who's Lebanese, because you really truly see the lack of power that our country has and that our country holds. For it to be spoken for and for it to be it's weird looking at it from the outside, right? Because we've never truly, ever since Lebanon has been quote unquote born, it's never been truly independent. You've always had some mandate state or some empire or some colonizer in some shape, way, or form that is taking charge for Lebanese matters in the international affairs in general. And so now it's quite tough because two things can be true at once. Lebanon can be part of the US-Iran war, but it is also part of a separate quote unquote war, which is the war with Israel. And it's an existential war, really. In which we're seeing, parts of our lands have been taken before, so this war has never ended, even though you've had general moments of peace. We've never really seen an end to it. Even during times of peace, parts of our lands were being taken and
Seem to have lost Michelle there for a moment, but we're going to try and get her back because I think she's making very, very important points. We're going to take a quick ad break and we'll try to reconnect with Michelle. And we're going to see if she's going to be reconnecting with us because I think she's making very, very important points, especially around the strength of Lebanon when it comes to diplomacy, when it comes to interacting with other countries within the region. Lebanon being spoken about by so many countries: Iran, Israel, the United States of America, all of them having an opinion about whether or not Lebanon should or should not be part and parcel of these negotiations that we saw collapse just last week, and Israel being, I think, at the center of that conversation. And it leaves a bitter taste in the mouth. Michelle, thank you for reconnecting again. We lost you there for a moment, but I think I was just talking to the audience about a point that you're making, the fact that it is very, very disheartening looking at Lebanon and having all of these other different countries speaking against Lebanon or against Lebanon, and it feels like it doesn't really have a voice. It doesn't have a voice in diplomacy. It doesn't have a voice in negotiations, and it's a very, very concerning state of affairs. And I think you put that quite eloquently.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure if you'd like me to continue on that point.
Yes, please. Yes, please. Yes, please.
Yeah, so I mean, I really do echo the sentiment of what you said, and it's really a tough place to be, and it's a tough reality to exist in, especially that we've seen this happen in history over and over and over again. Of course, it makes sense for the government to be involved in such conversation and such talks, but then the question becomes, what power does our government hold? And what is it able to enact and what is it not able to enact? Because we've been part of this chess game for years and years and years, in which our government has never really truly taken proper power and taken matters into their own hands. They've always had a protege of the sorts, and that protege changes over times and over the years. And this goes back to the point we were making before about the negotiations as well with Israel, is that what power? Of course, every person wants to see their country holding and their government holding some sort of power. But the question is now, what power does the government hold? And who is directing these talks, and who is directing where our government should go towards? Because I think they're stuck in a very tough rock where, we all know that the US plays a big role in the way that the Lebanese government functions. And these degrees we can agree or disagree on, and we can say that they're very various degrees. But then the question is, will Lebanon also be negotiating, keeping in mind its own peoples and the entirety of the country's safety, including the South? Or will these negotiations have concessions in them that also do include giving up parts of Lebanon or parts of our being that are oftentimes marginalized, and then it won't really make a difference to other people, let's say, in the country if they're given away. So it's really, no one has a proper answer to what we can expect from these talks. And I think this time around with the US-Iran war and everything happening, maybe in 2024, it was a little easier to conceptualize what the future could look like, maybe just by a little bit. But this time around, it's quite hard to imagine what's going to come out of these talks between Israel and Lebanon alone, and even the talks between Iran and the US.
Very, very concerning. The fact that it feels very, very messy, and there's no direct line of who's who and who gets to negotiate with who. Lastly, before I let you go, Michelle, how are you as a Lebanese citizen, as a human being, watching your country again being at the center of this aggression by Israel, and once again there seeming to be no solution? From a personal point of view, if you don't mind sharing with us, how are you?
First of all, I really do want to thank you for this question. And the reality is, I don't know how I am. I feel like the past month and a half have been a blur, really, where we go in and out of reality. It's really hard to grasp what's currently happening, and it feels so weird living it out, and seeing our families and friends being displaced from my own family has been displaced, extended family has been displaced from the South. And it's so hard to grasp and grapple with this reality because we don't see an end to it, and because we're seeing so much pain and so much heartbreak. I mean, our journalists are getting killed. They're getting targeted and killed. Our paramedics just yesterday, or was it yesterday or before yesterday, another member of the Lebanese Red Cross who was doing his very humanitarian duty and going and saving people who have been attacked or have been injured or killed by the airstrikes has been attacked. So we're seeing a lot of double strikes take place. So I can't personally, sometimes I can't hold all this heartbreak in my body. So it translates as frustration and numbness and, and just sorrow, really. It's really tough. It's really tough experiencing it again. And we have this conversation with our parents where our parents didn't want us to experience the heartbreak that they have experienced in the war and the wars that took place in between 1975 and 1990. They didn't think their kids would go through similar heartache again. And yet here we are, and in my lifetime, I've experienced three wars. So I've experienced the 2006 war, the 2024 war, which began in 2023 and still is ongoing till now. And then this again. So it's crazy to think that this is generational and that our parents experience the same and our grandparents are same. But we say عن جد, and I'm going to use this word in Arabic, and it's something that keeps me going, as alhamdulillah, and I'm so thankful that I am safe at the moment and that my family is safe and that we're still here and we still refuse to leave this country. This land is ours, and no matter the heartbreak, we're not leaving.
I think going to leave it on that note, Michelle, and I can guarantee you, from us here in South Africa, we're constantly thinking about the people of Lebanon. Our country is very, very good friends with your country, and you are in our thoughts and prayers. And I hope you stay safe, and I hope we chat again soon.
Thank you so much. Have a great day. Goodbye.
There we go. And with that, going to take a quick break. News and views will continue after this.